Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Cassidy Diamond. I am the Associate Director of Public Programs and Events here at the IDA. Before we get started, I would like to offer a brief land acknowledgement, as we always do. Today, I am coming to you from Chicago, which is on the unceded land of the Potawatomi people, who have been stewards of this land for generations. I would also like to thank our media sponsor, IndieWire, for helping to bring this series to you. And you can check out the rest of our screenings for another couple months on documentary.org/screenings-series. And you can see all the wonderful films and Q&As we have coming up. I think you'll enjoy them all. But you all are here to witness an amazing conversation with LA Times TV critic Lorraine Ali and the filmmakers from the New Yorker Shorts Film Block. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Lorraine.
Thank you all so much for being here, and I would like to introduce our panelists. First up is Sarra Abed of Ain't No Time for a Woman. Hello. Next is Jimmy Goldblum of A Broken House. Hello, welcome. Amar Shabib of Joe Buffalo.
Hi there.
Hello, Amar, how are you?
Good, thanks. Nice to be with you all.
And Pablo de la Chica of Mama. Hello.
Hello.
Pablo. So thank you all for being here. And I know I said before the cameras came on how moving all your films were, and I was just blown away. So I'm really happy to be talking to you all about them because they deeply moved me, and some of them were very funny, and they stuck with me. So I kind of want to jump right in. They're all very different from one another, but I'd like to ask you, and I know this is the big question, but like, what drove you to these subjects in the first place? Because I know there's a big wide world out there, plenty to, dig into. So Sarra, can I start with you? What drove you into this hair salon to do this?
Well, I grew up in Tunisia until the age of 9, and then I immigrated with my parents to Montreal. And since we've left Tunisia, we were going back and forth like during the summers. And I was always really fascinated about the women of my family. And I was always like, as a younger girl, I was writing stories about them. And I was telling them, one day I'll write a book about you. I'll do a film about you. I was just always so impressed about their charisma, their humor, their strength. And as I grew up, I kind of learned more about the history of my country. And also because of when I was in Montreal, everyone assumed that since we were Muslims and Arabs, we were a certain way, but the way that they depicted our culture wasn't exactly what I knew as a younger kid. And so it always struck me, and mostly because of how the women in Tunisia were free and how they fought for their rights for so long. And so I always wanted to do something about it. I always wanted to like educate people about it. I wanted them to see what I was seeing. And so it's kind of why I wanted to do a film in the salon. I wanted to do something about the politics. And with the revolution and everything that was going on, it was just the perfect timing to present this strength and these women, but also present this peculiar history of this tiny, tiny Arab country, and just show how these women are not stopping their fight. And so it's kind of how the idea came about.
And it is the idea of the humanity behind the story. And Pablo, Mama is also that, and it's in a war zone And it's this incredibly moving story. And by the way, I want to go there and raise baby chimps. God, there's anyway. Can you talk a little bit about what drove you to the story?
Well, I began to know the story when I traveled for Kampala, the night before I began my first film in Uganda. I know Lorena. Lorena told me the story of Mama, and this is the kind of stories to block your mind because it's really, really powerful. And I make a promise to Lorena. Lorena is one of the main characters of the film, to one day come back to Congo and tell and shooting the story for the rest, and recording and try to do the best short film or film. I don't know, because when I began to shooting, I don't know exactly what is the metrage of the film. And well, this is the story to come back. This is a promise to go for Congo, but in the reality, it's a complicated for a documentary. People go for Congo because it's really a violent place. It's one of the more dangerous places to be a woman. Is always is a constant the sensation of violence, because the guerrilla is really close, and it's in the environment. But in the same time, everything happened with Mama is a magical story, and this is the real reason to go to shooting in Lido. And the baby chimpanzee is so dangerous. Really, it's not that all people see a baby chimpanzee and this is this is really beautiful. And I have a tattoo of one of the baby chimpanzee, but in the reality, baby chimpanzee is one of the most violent animals in the world, and intelligent. It's not a pet.
All right, there goes my idea of having one. Jimmy, can you talk a little bit about A Broken House, which I just have to say, like, had me unexpectedly crying in many places.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things that drew me to it. I think on a certain level, I have a bit of an obsession with cultural loss, just like, Damascus is the oldest inhabited city on earth. And I think there was something in the ways in which, I don't know, like I would look at the images coming out of the war and what we were getting in our media. And it was just like, it's something that Muhammad talks about in the film. It's like the way that we try to build empathy is by consistently just showing grotesque imagery over grotesque imagery. That's sort of the route that I think a lot of like journalists have taken, a lot of documentary filmmakers have taken. And I was like disturbed by it. I was frankly just really disturbed by it. And, my wife is from Pakistan. Around the time of the Muslim ban, she used to be a conflict reporter and she was diagnosed with complex PTSD. And I was just seeing the way in which like violent imagery and unexpected violence in our media was affecting her. And I wanted to tell a story about refugees, about migration, and about war that wouldn't use violence as a way to build empathy, as a way to build connection with audience. And I thought that Muhammad's art, the way in which he takes the people out of it and just shows the shattered buildings, the way that he shows these cultural artifacts and the ways that they get destroyed, I thought it was a different way to connect. And yeah, I was sort of excited by the idea of trying to build empathy without re-traumatizing audiences, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, and the commonality between these films is a different way into these subjects. And Amar, with Joe Buffalo, there's so many things that I thought I knew that I didn't know. And with the residential schools, I thought that was something from the far, far past. And his story really sort of brought that to the fore. Anyway, can you talk a little bit about, this film?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you're absolutely right in that's kind of most people's perception. And like even here in Canada, we had this like big kind of truth and reconciliation kind of process back in 2015. Most people think of residential schools as something that happened, in like the turn of the century up to maybe like the 60s, 70s. But yeah, the last school didn't close until 97, I believe. So Joe was part of the last generation to attend. So the film kind of came about with, I actually met Joe in Montreal through skateboarding, actually back in 2005. We kind of hung out together and skated over the course of the summer and filmed together. And then I left, moved out west to go to film school, and we kind of lost touch. And it wasn't until 2019 where I saw an article about him turning pro. And that's when he started talking about being a residential school survivor, because he never talked about it before in the past that I'm aware of. So I was just kind of blown away by him and his story, and everything that he had to overcome to get where he is. And he's kind of a legend in skateboarding, especially in Canadian skateboarding. So I was just kind of immediately drawn to him and his story. And also thought of it as a way, there was an opportunity here to bring this story to like a larger demographic, or a different demographic than ordinarily would watch, a documentary by the NFB about residential schools. Like a young 18-year-old skateboarder kid is not going to go to NFB to watch something like that, most likely. So anyways, we reconnected and just kind of reconnected our friendship. And then the film was just kind of born out of that, essentially.
And can you talk about, I'll just throw these out to you. Pablo, I'll go to you first. Just some of the challenges of making your film. I can imagine there were plenty.
The challenge, well, I think all when you travel to shooting in Africa and shooting in Central Africa is, I don't know how to sound. It's always a challenge, because when you travel.
Here we go. Let's pause.
So Pablo, can you just talk about some of the challenges of making the film, Mom? I know there were plenty of them.
Well, I think everything is a challenge when you travel for Central Africa to try to make a film. Always is a problem in the border. Everything is a problem with the money. Everything is a problem to show your camera, because it's normally it's not, you don't have the permit to shoot in. But for me, a personal challenge is try to make the best film and try to make the best film and to show the magical therapy between mama and his baby chimps. This is for me the more challenge, because always in my mind I think, and when I talk with my team, is always I have one try. Always have one try. These days is a perfect day. This is the best day to shoot in. Do the best. And always is a challenge every single day too, because it's only I travel for Congo with only 3 people, and you need to make a direction, production, and everything inside, and sometimes it's complicated. Clean your mind and try to be focused in the story, but the more challenge for me is try to do the best always, because for me my main character is the one of the magical characters. Maybe it's the best character I never had. I think it's this is my challenge. The rest of the challenge is a complicated, but it's part of the work.
Yeah, she's a beautiful human being. I mean, she's a complex human being. How long were you there?
23 days.
Wow.
In Lido. Because it's a long way between Madrid and Lido. You need to take a couple of flights, a car. It's in the middle of the jungle.
Mm. And Jimmy, your film moves all over. I mean, you're in several different locations. Can you talk about A, some of the challenges, but B, some of the unexpected things maybe that you found on that journey? Because it seems like it was a journey.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, my full expectation was that we were just going to film with Muhammad in Connecticut, and that was going to be it. And we were going to show him making his art and see how he works with the sort of refugee community and, around New Haven. And that was it. And then just, I would say on day 2, he took a Zoom call, and this was prior to, or FaceTime, I guess, but he took it prior to quarantine, of course, with his mother, who was back in Damascus. And he was just talking sort of openly about, oh, you know, I'll see you during New Year's. Like, Dad's going to stay home. I'll come visit you in Beirut, because he can't go back to Damascus, or else he would be sort of recruited into the army, or potentially worse. And so it just changed the plan, you know? I mean, and I think that's the thing with the documentary process in general, which is like, you go in with your preconceived ideas of like, this is the story that I'm going to tell, this is how I'm going to tell it most emotionally or most cinematically, and then like reality presents itself. And I just became increasingly interested in the ways in which like his parents were separated but not divorced, as many Arab families, you know, it's just like not really even spoken about. And that, you know, the ways in which the war sort of subtly upended his marriage, upended his parents' marriage, you know, sent his like very tight-knit family, and they're bifurcated and across the world. It just unfolded. And I thought that, yeah, I just wanted to see him through that journey. So it was really just taking our budget and trying to stretch it so we could film in Lebanon for a couple of days over New Year's.
Right, and the themes that you hit in there, I mean, my family is from Iraq, and like, it was like watching that journey and watching my family go apart. You really captured that. I can't talk about it too much. I don't want to cry on camera, but yeah, amazing. Sarah, can I ask you, because I just saw you nodding your head when Jimmy was talking about, you know, your best laid plans, you have to just follow what you get. I saw you nodding your head like, yep, like what are you thinking?
Well, you have to know that Ain't No Time for Women was the first non-student film that I made. So I just got out of school, and my producer wasn't a producer when she got into the project. So multiple things happened prior to filming. So the filming, everything was fine. It was just more of the organization before. And so basically we applied, we have like a government funding here in Canada that's called the SEDEC. And so we applied to have money to be able to shoot. And so the day we were supposed to have our response back was, I think it was in July. And the election were supposed to be in, I think by the end of October or November. So we would have, if we had the money, we'd have the money, and then we'd have like maybe 3 months, 2 months and a half to be prepared. But then the morning when we were supposed to get our answer, I woke up and had like all these notifications from multiple like journals and stuff. And it was saying that the actual president died. And so they had to do the elections like 2 months prior to the day that was supposed. So basically it was, we had our funding and we had to go shoot 3 weeks after that. And so that was like, we weren't prepared at all. And it was our first film. As I said, my producer never produced anything. And we were doing a documentary in Tunisia during the election. My family thought that I was completely crazy. Like, you don't know what is going to happen. Maybe there's going to be another revolution. Like, and so we got everything figured out. We went to Tunisia and we got all our material was stuck at the airport. Because so we had like the right authorization, but there was like multiple other authorizations that you don't know about when you're a foreigner. You have to be like in the film industry in Tunisia to be aware of it. And so we were missing authorizations. And so we had 2 days of like, how are we gonna shoot it? Are we gonna like, so we had like multiple things going on. And so finally we were able to get our material back and we got to shoot. But yeah, that was like a pretty intense thing. And I think like that's documentary. And like during filming, it was sometimes you were predicting things and some other things were happening. And then when we arrived at the editing part, like even my editor, I was like, there's 7 films in what we shot. Like we would be able to do 7 different movies with what we shot. So we just have to rewrite it and decide what direction we want to go. So that's why I really connected with what you were saying, Jean.
That's what's so great about it too, because you're in this little contained space, but the story keeps changing. You're hanging off a cliff. And I thought that was just amazing. And Amar, like, you, I would imagine that some of the challenges that you faced may have been more of pulling out this incredibly painful story, but can you just talk a little bit about that, about what you faced making this film?
Yeah, obviously it's very delicate, you know, a very delicate story, and I have a little bit of context in the sense that I have a Syrian background, and I made a feature doc with 3 Syrian musicians who were forced to become refugees that I filmed with over 5 years, and who went through a lot. And so I had a little bit of context of working with folks living with trauma, and so I think for me, right from the very beginning, it was really important to work with Joe as an equal collaborator, and that he was not just like the subject of the film, like we were partners going into it. And so we're both writers on the project, and so it was just kind of like I think the basis had to be our friendship was the most important thing, and keeping that the most important thing, and kind of keeping Joe empowered. Essentially, was his decision what he wanted to talk about or not want to talk about, and only as much as he wanted to. And so it took time, it took time also to build trust again as well, because some of the things he talks about in the film he's never told anyone. So so it was definitely a process. We started with just talking about his life, and just kind of taking notes about his life, and then just kind of presenting it back to him, just being like, hey, this is what I'm hearing, like, what do you think about this? And it kind of just evolved in that way until we were happy with kind of the outline, and then we started recording the voiceover for the story, which were actually more like the audio interviews, a combination of scripted voiceover and audio interviews that we just recorded at my dining room table, just me and him with a mic and just chatting. And we did that over a course of several hours, several times. And then again, like once that was done, I edited that together and presented to him and made sure he was happy with it. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, it's really just about trust and empowerment, and just kind of keeping that as the most important thing in our relationship.
And though these films are all really different from one another, trauma is, I think, a common theme. Even Sarah, with the women in the salon, I mean, the older women have been through something the younger women don't understand. But also I think loss and reclamation, like reclaiming or trying to reclaim, either it's your culture, your identity. I guess this is just me talking about what I got out of these films, but what did you hope, or are you thinking about how you want these films to hit people when they go out there? Or are you just on a journey to discover what you will find? I think Jimmy, just start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. I think like something that I've come to believe, at least in the United States, is that we live in a traumatized society. Like this is a trauma, like we are a post-war society. We've been at war since the inception, founded on genocide and slavery, and it's just none of it has ever been processed. And so like, there's just been an interesting process for me in sort of realizing like, oh, like the people who maybe identify as having PTSD are actually the ones who almost have like hit the point of intolerance for what the rest of us are able to just digest on a day-to-day level. Like I was thinking about like Afghanistan, right? And it's like, for 20 years we were at war with this country. Probably the vast majority of Americans couldn't name 2 cities, if even one. And then all of a sudden we're pulling out, and there's this intense news cycle where you're seeing the most traumatizing imagery of like Afghan people essentially being murdered. And then you focus on that for like 3 days. Nothing else is talked about. You're seeing the imagery just pouring into your brain, and then it's gone. is just gone. Like, when was the last time anyone heard a story from Afghanistan? Since like 3 or 4 weeks ago, right? And so like for me, I'm really interested in trying to like come at these stories again from a different way, which is like, let's not use violence. Let's not actually just like casually watch people get murdered and then like move on. It's insane. Like, it's actually insane. So like for me, I'm trying to be like, let's talk about how art can give us a lens in. Let's talk about how family can give us a lens in. Let's talk about how culture can give us a lens in, just to hope that we can sit with it longer and break out of this insane pattern that we're all in.
And there's a moment too in the film where you're in the refugee camp and talking to this man who's been in there, and he's explaining like, I'm grateful, we're here, that this was available to us, but when we came here, the woman running it's explaining to me how to use a light switch, as though I come from a cave, and I thought, as with many of your films, it was one of like the first times I've seen it addressed, of how these people who are victims of war are also treated like they're from something from the dark ages, or something that we couldn't possibly connect with ourselves.
It's so dehumanizing. And I think that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like, and it's dehumanizing by design, right? Like, it's much easier to go to war with people who you don't think cherish the exact same things that you do. So like, I do think that it's like, we make small contributions as documentary filmmakers, but if you can give humanity to a space where it's purposefully being denied, I think it's a good thing to do,
And Pablo, what was your intention when making the film, or were you just going on that journey? What did you hope would come out of it? Oh, mute. You have to unmute.
My intention is try to tell the rest of the world the story of Mama, because always thinking if I am a filmmaker and some history touch me, I think like my partners listen a story and you began to think, it's a magical story, or it's a incredible story, or somebody or something touch you. It's the same for me with the story of Mama. I remember the day when Lorena told me the story, and I make this promise. And the first day when I met with Mama and his smile, and my intention is try to show to the rest of the world the story of Mama, because always thinking about, if I don't make this story, maybe nobody make it, and the story of Mama disappear. And nobody know about the relationship between Mama and his baby chimpanzee, and nobody thinking about the violence against the woman in Congo, the violence against the chimpanzee. Nobody, because nobody see. And I try to make a test or a movie to the rest of for the history, to say, I don't know, maybe for the new generation, or maybe for our generation, maybe for 20 years in the future, to say, this story happened. This is a magical story. It's a story about love, and always you have the possibility to have this relationship with the world. No, with your animal, and with the relationship with people. This is always I try to make a story about love, and this is my first intention when I try to make the story. And this is a challenge, because Mama is a really great character.
Yeah, but I think that's what sticks with you after it. I think that intense love there, and also her story is so traumatic, but what you come out of that film with, you come out with the sense of like possibility rather than utter darkness, and a lot of times what I like to refer to in the news, and Jimmy, you were just talking about with war and all that, is misery porn, like, and I love that it ends with this possibility, and I feel like all these films do, the idea that there is something else.
Yeah, I think everyone try to find his own place in this world. And for a lot of people, it's really difficult because have a background of violence, have a background of darkness, maybe born in a really difficult country, and everyone need live with peace and live with his family and try to be a normal person. But always the challenge to be a one person, only try to find your place in the world, a little place in the world. And this is the story of Mama. Mama tried to find his own space, and his own space is really, really, really a little place. But in this place, she is safe and she reborn again. And this is in the same kind of way with my college, it's a story of resilience.
And Sarra, can you just talk a little bit about what your intention was and that what you hoped and you hope people will get out of the film?
There's a combination of things. I think I made this film mostly because it's kind of a love letter to the woman that raised me. So there's a big part of it that's I wanted to share them with the world. I wanted the world to get to see them, to know them, and to see their strength, their resilience, and the way that, and that's a particular trait about Tunisians, but Tunisian women mostly. Most of them have gone through a lot of things that they didn't necessarily talk about in the documentary, but they went through stuff, and they just have this way to make everything funny and everything joyful and hopeful and colorful. And I was always really, I always admired that, and I think that's what gives them their strength. It's because they keep on going, and they have this positive way to tackle hardships. And so that's a thing that I wanted to share with the world. And also I think there's a big miseducation, misconception about the different histories of different Arab countries, and not just Tunisia. Like, we're all really different, and we all have different histories, and we were all something before this hate, and like all these things were the way we were depicted to the world. And I felt like showing that this tiny little country had that much history that no one knows about. That means that all the others all around the MENA region have a lot to something rich to give to the world. And just like people assuming that because you're an Arab woman, there's a way of being, and a way of, and it's just, there were a lot of people came to me after seeing the film and were like, I feel almost stupid because I'm realizing there's so much that I don't know. And that was something that I wanted to share. But yeah, and just also like giving a good time, even though it's like a hard time. It's something that I like to do in my projects. It was like, it's something difficult that this country is going through, but shown in a positive way. Yeah.
And absolutely, I love everything that you just said, and thank you for all that, because it was so needed. And I love that you did it through women, because there's so many misconceptions around that. And Mar, like, can you just talk about, I mean, we talked a little bit about this, but the intentions of the film, I wish we had more time because there's so much I want to talk about, but can you talk about the intentions and what you're hoping people will get out of this?
Yeah, so you know, along the lines of what we said, I think that I want well, I want people to take inspiration from Joe's story, that what everything that he's been able to overcome. I think, when I look at my own life in comparison to his and stuff, I'm just kind of like astonished by like all the setbacks he had from really since kind of birth, actually, and everything he's had to go just to kind of survive, essentially. So on the other hand, I think just making people more aware of the history of they call them residential schools in Canada, or just like, Indian boarding schools, they call them in the United States. The United States had them too. In fact, the Canadian system was modeled after the US system. The first, I think the big main school was in Pennsylvania. I think it was called the Carlisle Industrial School. And then Canada looked at that and was kind of like, oh, that's a good idea. And then they kind of made like a national program based on that. So it is in the US too. It's just not as well known about it. I think with, the recent discoveries earlier this year at Kamloops Residential School and then in Saskatchewan, I think it's come into more people's awareness. But yeah, I want people to know about that and realize that, these things are part of our living present, kind of really just along with what Jimmy was talking about, as far as like things that haven't been processed in our society, because they're just kind of there lurking in the background. And the people that are privileged enough to not have to have it right in their face, are not aware that it's there. And then people that are living with trauma in their families are suffering because of that. So I want to shine a spotlight on that, and again to include maybe a demographic that otherwise wouldn't have watched a film about residential school survivors. As I said, I think skateboarding is a way to kind of reach like a different demographic, and I think that's something we were very cognizant of in even the style of making the film itself, the way we constructed it. So yeah, and I want people to know more about Joe. And Joe's actually an emerging actor himself. He's been in a couple of very successful films, Hello Destroyer, that went to TIFF, and so he's very talented. And he runs a nonprofit called Nation Skate Youth, where they're bringing skateboarding to reservations all across North America. So as a means of empowerment and making young people proud of their culture and having fun through skateboarding. So I kind of want people to be aware of that too. And yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I love that the idea of bringing those, of doing this through skateboarding, because it's unexpected, through that lens. Okay, we're gonna run out of time in a second, but I'm gonna just do this quick lightning question. What do you want to do next, or what interests you? What are you looking at right now, or what do you want to do next? Is the theme of justice, or you can be specific, it's okay, or you can just say I can't tell you, it's top secret. Sarah, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I have many projects coming up, and they're all around. I think I'm not able to do anything that doesn't have a link to Tunisia, so all of them have, in a way, a link. I think it's the immigrant child in me that wants to find their roots back. And so yeah, and lots of female characters, driven women. And yeah, I'm exploring a lot of the culture that wasn't necessarily brought up to the world in different areas, like in music, and some things that we don't necessarily know about Tunisia and other Arab countries. So yeah, these are what I'm doing right now.
Okay, all right. Pablo.
Many projects, and I try to be quickly and don't say. Well, I right now, like a producer, I have in cinemas one of the film I shooting with a cooperation between Colombia, in the other side. Have an incredible career festival. Now the career of festivals and the campaign of Mama, and began to finish my first script in fiction. I finished Torino Feel Love last week, and I hope continue to make social movies, because it's the more important thing for me. That's it.
Amar?
Yeah, it was funny. I was really resonating with Sarra was saying, and that like always wanting to do something that has to do with my roots. I still think like that to some extent, but especially after coming out of film school, I was just like, that's kind of what I focused on, and I still feel that way to some extent, although circumstances have made it a little bit different. And working on this film with Joe Buffalo, and then the next project I actually have in post as well is about another Indigenous guy actually who ran 100 miles to raise awareness around mental health and addiction. So kind of similar themes in some ways to Joe Buffalo, but it's another short doc project that I have in post. And then kind of I have some ideas for just shifting actually more into the narrative space a little bit as well. I kind of like I'm straddling that line between nonfiction and fiction, or documentary and narrative, as even in, Joe Buffalo, I think uses some kind of narrative forms of storytelling. So yeah, that's kind of it.
Okay, and Jimmy?
Yeah, so, I guess like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, I don't even what is time? I directed the pilot for Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries, and it was like my first exposure to like the world of true crime, and I honestly found it like incredibly disturbing for many reasons. And so I actually am adapting this novel called Mary Lou is Everywhere. It's by this author Sarra Smith. And it sort of starts in Greene County, Pennsylvania, which is like the opposite corner of Pennsylvania from where I grew up. It's in Appalachia. And it sort of follows a young, like mixed race girl in high school who goes missing. And you sort of expect that it's going to be like, all right, here's the cops. They're going to look for the missing girl. And actually, it sort of shifts perspective into this little white girl who begins to sort of subsume her life. And it becomes a little bit of like a meditation on like, who goes missing, who gets searched for, and why. So yeah, just, like Pablo said, trying to stay in social stories and unpack some of our incredibly problematic systems that we perpetuate.
All right, well, thank you all so much for these wonderful films, and they are going to stick with me, and I'm sure everybody out there who's watched them feels the same way as well. And I want to thank all of you out there for listening and watching, and hope to see more films from you guys soon.